James Melendez, thank you for joining me today. This is about enabling and instituting team excellence, effective meeting culture, creating a culture for smart, effective, and process-driven meetings. Stay tuned and I'll tell you more about this. So this is our current state of meetings today. This is where most everyone is asleep, and really this is a realistic view, though a cartoon. But this does happen. Maybe people aren't really truly falling asleep, but close to it. So looking at this poor individual showing perhaps the state of this business, which is a downward trending red arrow. Very unfortunate because this person does not have the awareness and support of the meeting invitees. And this is what happens every single day that we meet. And unfortunately, that's because we have cultures of meetings that are set up to fail in this regard. So I'm going to talk to you more about how we can look at this particular situation differently. In this word cloud meetings, there's a lot of negative attributes to meetings, such as they're unproductive, they're personality driven, they're exhausting, they lack results, they're counterproductive, and they beget more meetings. So, it's really hard to think what meetings actually do occur and how many at a percentage basis are productive. Maybe 10%, maybe 5%. And that's really not a good use of an enterprise's time. Here that there are truly real costs associated with unproductive meetings. Unproductive meetings cost about $213 billion. I would say that number is probably 4 or 5 times higher. It's probably in the trillions. And this is really interesting to look at in the upper right corner. Multitasking is done by 92% of people in meetings. Yes, I've done that. I've done that because there was nothing else to do. I was actually being talked to or talked at. I wasn't participating. I'm not sure why I was there. And yes, I was definitely checking email. And this is really interesting. 49%, 1 out of 2 people, is doing unrelated work items. I think that's a call out in terms of disengagement, not just to the meeting, but to the organization. So I think this does have a long-term consequence, and it actually builds to how organizations don't plan well to succeed and actually don't do well against competition. So if you're really not succeeding internally, how are you going to succeed externally with real competitors? Ultimately, 71% of meetings are not effective. 65% said meetings kept them from completing their work. That's a huge number. Nearly an equal number say it kept them from deep thinking. So if you're not executing, you're not thinking, what are you doing? You're spending your time in meetings. And you're probably trying to get some work done in meetings, but you're still not getting enough work done. It's really hard to multitask and to do both things well. And 62% meetings missed opportunities to bring teams together. That is really key. That's because those team members are not allowed to participate. They're not invited to engage. And with that becomes a serious problem for why meetings exist. Now, how do we get to our current meeting culture? So, your functional manager might ask you things about meetings that took place that week or the week before. Did you get those meetings done? What did they result in? So ultimately, we think meetings get answers or agreements to move forward, but they do not. Sometimes it's often thought of you'll get a directional path, but you do not get that either. You can obtain support and garner consensus. Maybe, maybe not, and most likely not. Ambiguity is not ironed out. It actually becomes more complicated and becomes more ambiguous if that were possible, but it's true. Problems can only be solved by meetings. Actually, meetings create more problems. So I think there's a sense of, think about our current meeting culture. I think there's a sense of and power of busyness, ranking of importance, and knowledge bullying. Many a time I've tried to get onto an executive's calendar or a director's calendar, a manager's calendar, and they're really busy. Why are they busy? Because they're always in meetings. You need an answer, you need support, you need something from that person. And you can't move forward until you get that. And then you get the answer that they're always busy. Okay, that's great, but when can I expect an answer? How do I get to an answer? So I think there are things that, come from that, and it should not be a badge of courage, but one of disappointment and dismay from the enterprise itself. We do not know how to cope with enterprise problems. I think that's one reason meeting culture has blossomed in the past 3 generations. Enterprise problems are becoming more difficult, more complex. The world of competition is much more intense than ever before. So therefore, we think we can, solve problems by going to a meeting or creating a meeting with, quote unquote, the right people in the room. Our current state of meeting culture believes that meetings are effective and efficient ways of communicating. Now, moving forward, looking at increased meetings. Now, they've increased much more rapidly than, say, the U.S. population. You might, say between 72 and 2014, population in the United States has increased by, say, 100% or nearly 100%. And then you can look at the number of meetings. Well, between 72 and 14, they've increased 500%. So complexity, which I mentioned earlier, that is an issue for many enterprises today. And it's just a hunch. So I use the Google Ngram viewer to plot a trajectory. And I thought, well, maybe it's going to be stable or maybe a downward trend. And in fact, it's actually an upward trend. And I, requested a random word. I didn't want to use a word that I would input because it would be not a random word. It would be a biased word. So I just am giving you one. One is aid. But this is really just to demonstrate that not all the words in the Ngram viewer are going to be on a upward slope or a upward trend. Now, I wish this were our current meeting state. It's something that's cogent, it works well, people are happy. Our meeting culture today is a plethora of no agenda for meetings. There's no context for the meeting. I've been in meetings where I'd show up, didn't have the agenda, so I wasn't sure what the topic was. It was an hour long. There was no context either if it was an ongoing meeting, a limited series, or even a one-off meeting. So if it wasn't completely labeled in terms of the meeting title, I did not know the context of the meeting. I might ask what that was, and I might not get the answer. And really, I depend on the agenda to really drive that conversation, but also to be organized. So if the meeting leader or organizer is not organized, well, then you're not going to have an organized outcome of the meeting itself. We leave with no answers or conclusions, so meetings beget more meetings, unfortunately. Even with minutes, if minutes are taken, which they're not always, we still don't have agreements, decisions, or enough detail to even understand the reason for the meeting. So rarely is a meeting the ideal platform for communication. Now, one organization where I worked, I was a chief of staff, and supporting that leader, it was interesting because she thought having 12 meetings, actually 12 town halls per year, was really productive and helpful and useful. It actually wasn't, because that particular forum was thought of as a waste of time. It was an international audience, so therefore people would have to either stay late or wake up extra early. And that was really not something ideal for each team member. And it was also, why are we meeting so often? Other partner organizations in a larger organization are meeting 4 times a year. 12 times a year is expressing something of, maybe concern. And it wasn't really communicated well enough. I brought that back to the leader in terms of feedback that I received, and there was really no changes. And it was really, we complain about meetings in that particular culture, I said, and there's too many. And I said, this is an opportunity to give, maybe 6, 7, 8 hours back. And she continually said no. So there were particular comments on every year's engagement, too many meetings. So I was a person who completed the engagement surveys year over year for our employee team, for that organization. And it was a good measure to understand where people were coming from. By including everyone in a meeting, you're actually excluding everyone. That is, you have too many people. They're not necessarily the right people to have in the room. There's a culture that still presents itself as if you're not in the room, you probably are missing out on something, which is not true. In one meeting, and one example that I was at recently in an organization, so I declined the meeting, and in that meeting I got back was, you need to come. And I said, okay, is there something in addition to the agenda that's going to be talked about? Because this doesn't apply to me. No, you just need to be there. So I kept it on decline. I didn't show up. And then I suddenly got all these texts from people like, so-and-so wants you in the meeting. So after 3 hours, there was no need of my time. There was actually nothing that I contributed. There was not even a solicitation of my thoughts. And so it was definitely a waste of time. So that meeting culture does not empower every single team member to, push back where it's applicable. Now, if you look online, you're going to see a lot of principles. A lot of people are, suggesting things from 5, 6, 7, 10 principles to do. Now, this is not going to change your meeting culture. This is not going to even make your meetings more productive, because principles cannot live on their own, because the right environment, the culture, has not been set up to accommodate improvements. So I think it's something to think about. One organization that I was consulting in had 18 principles. You might read 1, 2, or 3 of them. There's nothing interesting or important that I'm finding here. I actually stopped reading, so I'm not going to read the other 15. And that was really an organization that was faltering because they were faltering in too many meetings. Everybody attended every single meeting, and everyone's complaining about not getting enough time to get their work done. So It's not only instituting meeting principles, again, it's about creating an organizational shift to team excellence meeting culture. Where to start? Well, I think there are 4 pillars to look at. So let's look at culture. So if you're going to create a culture, it's something that is required. You cannot not do this improvement in terms of team excellence, effective meeting, without doing some sort of cultural component. Everyone has a part to play. Everyone can participate. Instituting a plan and supported by executive management is required. Now, team excellence is also important, and I'll talk more about that. Now, team excellence is a body of work and methodology to help teams and organizations move forward. Now, there are specific items in the team excellence methodology to help things out, such as improved meeting culture, specific tools of meeting charter and agenda. Next, there's learning. Methods don't teach themselves. A learning plan for all team members is required and needed for this to succeed. Lastly, there's growth mindset. A growth mindset aids in adopting and maintaining a culture of robust and improved meetings. These 4 pillars are essential to have a cultural improvement for meetings in your organization. Now let's initiate and chart your course. Create a plan. Then when you create a plan, you have to train to that plan, and then you execute and you have goals to that plan. You look for feedback and how to sustain your improved meeting culture. You don't get your meeting culture right away. You have to work towards it. You have to plan for it. And you have to really make sure that all team members are allowed to participate. This takes time for an organization to do, but it's one worth doing. So this is for meeting organizer, some overarching principles that I've suggested. So need for a meeting. And I'll show you what the team excellence meeting charter looks like. So meeting management, keeping meetings running on time, very essential. Now use a team excellence agenda. Deliver this prior to the meeting. So be sure to attach reports, studies, plan, or anything pertinent to the meeting, and ask your team members to read that before the meeting. That's also going to give some context. That's helpful to that participant as well. Give the purpose, intention, and expected outcome. Now, if you're starting this meeting out infrequently or it's a standing meeting, you might say what the purpose of the meeting is. I'm here to really communicate with you about where we are in this particular initiative. I need some help with your functional areas as it relates to this project. So giving some expectation, what you want from them in the meeting. And also thinking about quorum. Is it needed? Is it a representative model? Is there a proxy? So while not everyone can be there, someone else could stand up for someone else in another team. That's an important feature that I think a lot of people do not utilize. Attendees. Make sure they're the right ones, and not everyone. And the right ones include people who can make a decision, or who are the right people, the right information, or even subject matter expertise. Timing and duration. Always end your meetings 5 to 10 minutes prior to the hour or half hour. Meeting minutes. Make sure they're distributed within 24 hours. Action capture. Just as in your minutes, keep them in one location accessible to everyone. Make sure it's transparent. Participation. This is essential. Around the table is really important to make sure everyone has an opportunity to talk. I've been in one meeting I'll never forget. It's one senior leader who would actually have a meeting, talk for an hour, hour and a half, almost completely. There was no sense of getting any sort of feedback. So getting team participation is essential. Around the table, you have to do that. You have to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk about things that are important to their specific functional areas. And it also feels great to be included. I'm going to be called on. I better be ready. I should be prepared. And that's going to really help focus in on getting more participation and engagement in your meeting. Feedback at the end of the meeting. What worked and what's an opportunity for improvement in the meeting? And now the meeting participant also has a set of principles as well. Developing culture is how I would phrase this. Participating is important. Again, around the table should be the norm. Why am I here? Is my participation really needed? What is needed from me? What is meeting's purpose, intention, and intended outcomes? If I know some of these, I might be able to say, I don't need to be here. Why are meetings standing? What's a rationale? What's a purpose? What are follow-ups to meetings in terms of, say, action items, decisions, past and future agendas? Where will they be stored? It's all about transparency, not just to build credibility, but to help the team to feel engaged. Completely important, completely relevant. Now, is a meeting too short or too long? Can this meeting be reduced from 15 minutes to 25 minutes? So when you think about feedback as essential, a survey is one place to start, but it's also creating that cultural dialogue, that feedback to your manager and to the meeting organizer. It's not a punitive situation, it's just really giving feedback. So all team members, leaders, facilitators, participants should have a team excellence effective meeting training when onboarding into an organization, and of course have that refresh throughout the year. Are meetings running on time? If not, they should be voiced during the meeting. So there are 3 meeting types: standing, limited series, and non-standing. They're for group and one-on-ones. So if you're instituting team excellence effective meeting plan, it's also about one-on-ones. I've talked to colleagues in the past and I've said, yeah, I meet with my manager every week, and I'm like, is there enough to talk about? And rarely is there for, week over week. That's 4 hours per month that I could use, or 2 hours. It depends how long the meetings were. And, maybe I need one every other week, maybe once a month. And I'm surprised that a manager would want to do that. But think about it. It could be about control or fear of not having enough information. But in fact, those managers should be going to their direct reports asking for any sort of questions to be answered, or perhaps an email or a phone call. So here's a team excellence agenda that I talked about earlier. This is something where you can put meeting information, especially for a standing meeting, such as the Zoom or the WebEx information or other electronic service. You can look at topic details. So you can see here there's a meeting leader, a facilitator, an action item keeper. So the whole participation of the team is to hold the team accountable. That is, we've only allotted 30 minutes, but we've gone into 40 minutes. We're going to have to cut something down. And that's to keep things going on schedule. So for example, in this agenda, you could look at, so there's topic detail, allocation, desired outcome is important because this helps to get the organization to understand what's needed with a specific topic, to inform. Maybe it's an action or maybe it's an agreement. And so I think these things are essential to look at. It talks about the presenters, the stop and start times, and links to materials. So this is one way to effectively, and in terms of time, look through each item and to address each item in the respective time slots that they are listed in. Now, you could also do this with one-on-one agendas. So I'll put, at a minimum, topic, purpose, and outcome. And so I'm going to put topic and purpose, and if there's an outcome, maybe I need something signed, approved, I might put that in the invite as well, and that should be expected. So maybe that manager is like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to approve something. Maybe that manager might be alerted to, hey, James, can you send that agreement to me before the meeting so I could review that? Sure, no problem. Here it is. Creating a team effective meeting culture and to make that change is intentional. It has to be by design. It's something that if you want an effective meeting culture, you have to be ready to, first of all, the executive sponsor needs to be in place, identified. You need a dedicated business or process owner. So maybe it starts with the chief of staff or continuous improvement manager, or maybe both. Or maybe it shifts from one person to another to create the plan and set the goals. And once you have the plan created, get that endorsement by your executive and leadership team. Analyze the results and also sustain with continuous support, learning, and sponsorship. How might team excellence effective meeting culture help your organization? So who owns and participates in team excellence effective meeting culture? Everyone. That's essential. That's important. That means everyone from the individual contributor who has a say in meeting culture development and execution all the way to the senior leadership. Now, I just want to say that, team excellence is part of a whole list of methodologies and tools such as organizing orbits, operational racetrack, project management charters, effective meetings, and so forth. But it's really to help organizations and teams work more effectively. So a team excellence meeting charter, like a project charter, if you're going to have more than 2 people in a meeting, you might want to have this done as perhaps a checklist. What's obviously the meeting name? Make sure it's a meaningful name and a name that's reflective of what the meeting topic is. Make sure there's a purpose listed, attended outcome. Is it a one-time limited or standing series? And also, the time and date for the limited and standing meetings. Is there a sunset date for a limited series? Also duration, attendees, and maybe you want to talk about this as a proxy model. And also the document center, where will that be located? And if you can answer these questions, you could, obviously put them into your meeting invite. I think if you look at this in terms of, the team excellence meeting model and team excellence in general, it's helping organizations to be more effective. You're not going to have more effective meetings unless you set a plan to do so. And I think that's essential today. And I think about your continuous improvement manager. And if you don't have one, you should have one in your organization. They can actually operate this, and that's something they're very good at doing. I think this is an important feature to consider in your organization. Please list your questions and comments down below. I'd love to know what they are. Reach out to me if you have specific questions. So thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate your support. Share this video, and more topics to come on business and business methodologies. Stay tuned, and I will see you soon.